Hi everyone, it's Katie here from Abridge Academy, and I'm so excited today to do a quick live. I'm going to work you through some of the Abridge Academy Olympic theme lessons, which are totally free. So if you're brand new here, there's a link underneath the video to get those free teaching materials for your online classes. But I'm just getting things started right now. If you're watching the replay, feel free to jump ahead a little bit because I'm just going to do a quick warm up, make sure all the tech is working and everything else. Is it working on my phone? Oh, it is. That's great. Perfect. So if you're tuning in, just pop a quick note in the chat saying hi. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Let me know all of the audio and everything is working okay, just so I can check all the tech is good. And I'm just going to quickly pop up on the screen here as well, and the link is in the description. Today I'm going to be working through some of the Abridge Academy Olympic theme lessons. They're totally free, you can check them out, and the link is under the video or above, I think, on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, I think it's above the video. On YouTube, it's underneath the video. But yes, if you're struggling to find the link, just Google Abridge Academy Olympics and it should come up. So we've got 5 free lessons available in the Olympics themed sort of classes. And today I'm going to be focusing mostly on the debating theme ones, which are my absolute favourites. But there's also some for beginners, focusing just on general sports-related vocabulary and discussions. There's a reading-focused one, great for sort of pre-intermediate to intermediate level students. And then today we're going to be looking at the 2 debating theme lessons, which I really love for my sort of upper intermediate to advanced students. These are designed mostly for sort of young learners to teenage students, the debating more for the teens, the kind of more beginners level stuff for the young learners. Lots of interactivity and things built in. I'm going to be showing you all of that today. While I'm rambling, let me just go pop across to the chat and see who's tuning in. We've got Ivy joining us from Super Teacher. Hi there, Ivy. Great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. You're always here showing your support, and I really appreciate that. Thank you, CAE. Feel free to let me know what your name is so I can refer to you in the future sort of comments. All good. Great to see that it's working fine. And Heather saying hi. Hi, Heather. Great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. Fantastic. Okay, now I did announce this live very last minute, so I'm not expecting huge numbers of people to tune in today. It's going to be more of a kind of informal work through, show you some different things, and probably the replay is going to be more popular than the live, but we'll see how things go. So let me just pull up the curriculum here. Before we get started, actually, I probably should introduce myself if you're new. So, hi, I'm Katie. Most of you probably know me as the director of Abridge Academy. I also do a lot of videos and things on YouTube with advice for online teachers and independent teachers specifically. And you might see me around a lot on Facebook and things as well, just generally giving advice and support for online ESL teachers. But today we're going to be focusing mostly on things relating to the Abridge Academy curriculum and obviously these free lessons, these free materials for you to use as well. But yeah, I'm Katie. I've been an online teacher for over 10 years now. I'm from the UK, as you can probably tell from my accent, but I've also taught in China and Japan before, as well as here in the UK. So I had quite a range of different teaching experience, which I've used to drawn on a lot when it comes to creating these lessons. Okay, let me pull up, why is it not showing? There we go. Pull up the lessons then. So when you log into Abridge Academy, if you're brand new, the link is in the description. You just need to join the free tier. So when you first click on the link in the description, it tells you a bit of an overview about the Olympics lessons. But when you click through to actually access the resources, it will tell you need to sign up for a free membership to get access. But it's free, like you just sign up for free. If you're a paid member, you also have access, of course, but the paid membership has loads of other teaching materials as well. But these Olympic ones, they're all free, so do check those out. And I'd love to hear how they're going as well if you've been using these in your classes. But anyway, when you first log in, if you've not just done it from the link, if you just log in normally, you should end up on your member dashboard. If you don't end up here, you either haven't registered properly or like you haven't set things up yet. So just follow the links. That will be somewhere to sign up. So you should end up here on your member dashboard. To get the Olympic stuff, you need to scroll right down to where it says expansion courses. And then the Olympics is under the intermediate section here. So it's a little hard to find from the member dashboard. I apologize for that. The link is also in the description, which takes you directly to Olympic stuff. When you click here on Olympics, and when it loads, this is the kind of Olympics overview page. The link for this is in the description. And there's some quick information here, blah, blah, blah. And at the bottom, you'll find links to all of the free lessons. There's actually 5 available here, covering different topics. So, for example, there's one on Summer Olympic Sports, which is great for sort of beginner ESL students. Where's that one? It's clicking through and it's moved. There we go. Free Olympics on Summer Olympic Sports, great for sort of beginners, learning the names of popular sports. And then there's like a reading one, which is great for reading comprehension practice about inspirational Olympic athletes. And then today I want to focus particularly on these debating theme ones, which are more intended for intermediate to advanced students. But yeah, you just click through on the link to get to this page, and you can find the lessons linked at the bottom here, or also on the left-hand side in the sidebar menu as well. So do check those out and to see which are most relevant for your students. I'm going to jump in though with the debating one. I'm going to start with the intermediate level debating topic. The reason I really love debating, I'm just going to jump back to my beautiful face. So the reason I really love debating is because it works so much on students like advanced speaking skills, as well as a whole range of other things they need to know in English. So for example, they're developing more advanced sentence structures, the ability to sort of analyze and assess, what they're understanding what's going on and what other people have said and analyzing that to come up with their own arguments against it, or analyzing data to back up their arguments. They're explaining why they believe something. They're using evidence. So all of these kind of quite advanced skills to analyze and describe what they want to say and speak in a more advanced, also quite formal way as well. So they can learn slightly more formal English. It's also relevant if they're sort of developing academic English skills, because quite often when you're writing an essay in school, for example, they want you to explain why, or to give evidence or look at data that's being used in science, for example. All of that does link into skills that they develop in debating. And of course, just being able to express yourself sort of fluently, quite eloquently, and sort of the ability to explain an argument is really important for those more advanced learners, particularly those who are looking to move to English medium schools or study abroad or things like that in the future. And also, debating doesn't feel boring. Like, I think sometimes when it comes to English classes, particularly if you're having like a grammar focused class, it can feel a little bit like, oh, just another grammar exercise, right? Whereas when it comes to debating, because it links into students' own opinions and ideas and real life some challenges that are, interesting to them, it's so much more exciting and engaging than just your standard sort of grammar lesson, even though they probably are learning some useful grammar points in that class. So that's one of the things I really love about debating. For me personally, it's something I've taught quite a lot, and particularly with my independent students, my private students, it's a good way of charging a bit more for like high level, more advanced, more specific niche classes. So if you're looking to earn a bit more teaching online, debating can be a really great niche for that. It also works really well for group classes. I love teaching groups, not just because of the money side, of course, you can earn more teaching group classes, but also because it's so much more engaging and interactive for learners, because they can talk to each other and share that different perspectives and learn from each other as well. And debating is a really great format to use for group classes too. So yeah, I do really love debating, and I'm sure I'll do another webinar sometime and I'll talk a bit more specifically about debating skills and why it's such a great thing to focus on. But yeah, today I want to show you the Olympics themed ones. And it could be a great way for you to try out teaching debating if it's something you're considering or want to see if your students might enjoy. It could be a great way to sort of link this into the fun Olympic stuff that's going on right now. Do it as a free open class perhaps, or just as a sort of summer group class for your current students, and see what interest there is. Before I jump across the materials, just have a quick look again at the comments. CAE is Kathy. Great to see you, Kathy. Thank you. She's saying, love your materials. I use materials and really love them. Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's great to hear. From Minnesota, my students are in China. Fantastic. Yeah, I think we have quite a diverse range of teachers tuning in from different countries around the world, which is awesome to see. Okay, let me go back to what I was presenting. Where's it gone? Here we go. So the debating classes are actually 2 levels, and I first made the first one, and then I realized my own students were a bit more advanced, so I made a second version that's a little bit more challenging. But there's 2 levels. The first level, sort of intermediate level debating, is focusing, like it's aimed at students of a lower intermediate level of English, and it's focusing primarily on putting together simple arguments and counter arguments. So, one person says one thing, how do you counter that argument? Although this, actually that, or however, these kind of words, this kind of terminology we use in a debate. And I'll show you that in just a second. The more advanced one is focusing more on using data, and there's a bit more analysis and stuff in there, and I'll show you that a little bit later on. But yeah, if we have a look at this lesson here, this is using, so the Abridge Academy curriculum, if you're not familiar with it, super interactive, all these engaging activities and things built in. And this is, of course, using our interactive slides in the same way as the normal Abridge Academy lessons are. You also find like learning objectives and things listed underneath. So if you're sort of wanting to send through to parents a bit of information about what the child's going to be learning in class, you can just copy paste those, send those through, or it's just useful for your own records or to link it in with what your students are currently working on. There's also some downloads here, and I can show you those in more detail later, but there's a PDF worksheet which you can send to your students. They can do it in the class or as a homework task outside of class. And there's a vocabulary list. I recommend sending the vocab list before the class as a kind of pre-learning task. So they can pre-learn the new words and look up what it is in their own language and look at the definitions and think about how you can use that vocabulary. So when it comes to the class itself, they're a bit more prepared. But yeah, I can show you those a bit more later. I think what we're more excited to see is the actual lesson slides though. So let's start with that. Let me just check this is all sharing fine. Yes, let me just put my face in the corner. There we go. Okay, so this text is covering things up. I'm going to hide the text, but if you do want the link to check out these free lessons, the link is in the description to get these free lessons. Just click on the link and you'll end up here. You'll have to sign up for the free tier first and then you'll get full access. So yeah, I'll just remove that at the bottom there. Now we can actually see the slides properly. Now, if you're teaching on like most teaching platforms, you can just open these slides in full screen mode here and then click on full screen. Because I'm using like a webinar platform for today's live stream, it doesn't really support the full screening mode properly. So I'm just going to zoom in like I just did here with my zooming in with 2 fingers on the screen. So apologies for the slight weird outline around it. So yeah, this slide, words today. I can speak honest. Okay, so this debate motion is, this house believes the Olympics is a waste of money. If you're familiar with teaching debating, this sort of structure, this house believes something, is quite a common way of phrasing a motion in a debate. Some people find it a bit weird. That's just how debates are. If your students aren't really learning and focusing on debating specifically, you can just gloss over that. It doesn't really matter. The key thing is you're debating the motion, the Olympics is a waste of money. Do you agree or do you disagree? That's the focus of today's debate. One thing I'd really recommend doing, definitely do, is make sure you put in your student's name and your teacher's name on the first slide here. Now, if you're teaching a large group of students, you can just write everyone in the box. That means when the lesson slides refer to a specific student, like there are greeting slides, for example, it says like hello, it will say hello everyone rather than hello a specific student. But if you're teaching an individual student, who wants to be my student today? Let's have a look who's commenting in the chat recently. We've got, I see Grant's tuning in. Hi there, Grant. Great to see you. My student loved the Olympic lesson. She's definitely a tough one to challenge. It's really helped her think outside the box. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that feedback, Grant. I really appreciate it. For that wonderful comment, you can be our featured student for today's lesson. So, student Grant and teacher, my name is Katie. So you can pop those on the first slide here. And that is used for personalization throughout the lesson. Okay. And we always start with some warm-up sort of starter questions. I think this is probably common to most English classes that you'll be teaching. You want to warm up your students before you really jump into the proper meat of the lesson. So these are just some warm-up questions. Again, you don't have to do all of them. Flexible, adjust according to what your students are interested in. Ask follow-up questions if relevant. Things like, what sports do you like? How often do you play? And if they mention, oh yes, I play every week, you say, oh, are you in a sports team? Like, are you in the basketball team? Do you compete for your school? Do you compete for your county or country? Like, what level are you at? And go into more depth if they actually express more detail if they can. If they sort of say they're not interested in sports, then perhaps gloss over that and quickly move on. But you can sort of use this as a prompt just to get them thinking about sports, about the Olympics, about what they already know about the Olympics, eliciting some existing ideas and thoughts on that. The last question in particular, so first you get them to think about how their country hosted the Olympics before. Obviously, that depends on where they live, but quite a few countries around the world have had the Olympics at some point in the past. You could even go Google that before your class. Look up your students' countries as to whether they've hosted the Olympics, just so you have that information yourself. And then, of course, that last one, do you think the Olympics are good or bad for the host country? It's great for linking into the actual debates that we're focusing on today. I find that most students, when I taught this class, most of my students are like, oh yeah, the Olympics are great. Like, we all love the Olympics. It's fantastic for the host country. And most of them identifies the kind of argument that it brings in a lot of publicity for the host country, brings in a lot of tourism for people coming to visit the Olympics or the events that are going on around the Olympics, that side of things. And it's quite interesting to see how their ideas might change and they might start thinking about different perspectives when it comes later on in the class. But it's good to get an idea of your students' initial thoughts, because then you can reflect on that as you go through. Okay, so yeah, we've got some quick starter questions. There we have summarising what we're going to learn today. It's always good to have an idea of this, but you don't need to go into too much detail with your actual students. We're going to learn some words, we're going to learn a debating skill, and we're going to have a debate. That's it. And then we jump into the new word section. Now, each of the sections of these debating slides, they've got these little, we call these can-do statements. They're often used for just expressing a learning objective. So here, the learning objective is, I can use 6 new words relevant to the Olympics. And these are being picked relevant for that particular level. This class is aimed at a B1, like lower intermediate level. So the 6 words that have been picked are around B1 level of English and relate specifically to this debate topic. So here we've got our new words. On this slide, some of the debating lessons in the Abridge Academy curriculum have got like more activities that focus on using the words and stuff. So here we're just presenting the new words to start with. I would just recommend, read out the words, check the students know it. Hopefully the students have done the pre-debate task like at home before the class where they've looked up these new words and they've thought about how to use them themselves. But use this as an opportunity just to check they can pronounce the words correctly, check that they understand what the word means. You can ask them to say, what's the definition? What is tourism? What does tourism mean? Maybe they don't know the word tourism, but they might know the word tourist. Okay, what's the relationship between tourist and tourism? Tourism is that the whole industry of tourists going to travel, right? That's tourism. So get them to refer back to what they already know as well as that new word specifically itself. If you actually click on the top left corner here, the teacher notes, there's some top tips as well. So if you're ever not sure on how to teach any of these slides, click on the teacher tips here. So it's saying here, probably a good thing to do, ask the student to repeat each word working on pronunciation. Ask them to describe the meaning of each word. What does tourism mean? If they know the definition, great. If they don't know the definition, relate to their existing learning, look at the picture, get them to think a bit more what they think it could mean. And then ask the student to make a sentence with each new word. So you could say, the Olympics is great for tourism. Good to link it to the theme of the lesson if you can. And the next one is enough. We've got kind of thumbs up, so it's good. And we're looking at quantity because there's like a ruler measuring the height here of water in the glass. A bit of an odd image, but kind of helps to visualize the concept of enough, which is quite an abstract sort of word, right? And again, you'd ask the student, what does that mean? Do you have enough of this? Is your English level good enough? Does the Olympics earn enough money to pay for the costs? And that links into the lesson topic. Get them to start using in sentences if they can. Anyway, so you go through the words like this, practicing those new words and putting together sentences. And then we can move on, just moving swiftly on here, to actually using these words. And this, again, relates specifically to the debate topic. And of course, this summer, the Olympics are in France, in Paris specifically. So we've got some sentences here, and the gap fills are just to be filled in with those new words. So Paris in France will something the 2024 Olympics. And of course, the word here would be host. The Olympics can something, can inspire children to do more sport. Now, if you're teaching a group class, I would make sure you're giving your students the opportunity to take turns answering each question, like give students a different sentence to do so they've all got the opportunity to participate in this. If they've got the worksheet printed out, this might also be something for them to jot down some notes on in the first section of the worksheet, but they've got arguments for and against the debate motion, because they're starting to come up here with a few ideas, like host countries can earn money from tourism. That's a positive, like for the Olympics, right? So they can start jotting down some notes on their worksheet and stuff if they've got that too. Okay, so once you've done this and you put the words in the correct boxes, it should then pop up with a nice little trophy reward, and students love these trophies. I know it sounds like a small thing, but students really love it because it's just celebrating they got something correct. If you're using a teaching platform that's got its own built-in sort of trophies or star rewards or something, you can use this as a quick reminder to yourself to give your students a star, or do that confetti thing on like While Ago, or all these kind of cool stuff that you might have built into your teaching platform. If you're just using something like Zoom that doesn't have built-in sort of reward systems, then you can just, the trophy is probably enough for a lot of students. With younger kids who really love it, then you can build your own sort of thing, like annotating stars on the side or something like that if you want to. But yeah, I don't bother. I'm too lazy. I mostly teach teenagers, so they don't need too many fancy stars. They're cool. Right, so we do go through this, make sure that they've put the right words in each box. You can also ask them some comprehension questions, check they've understood what the sentences mean. You could ask them to follow up and think on their own opinions on some of these statements. So, for example, host cities must build many new sports facilities for the Olympics. You could ask them to say, you live in, maybe they live in a city that hosted the Olympics before. What sports facilities were built for the Olympics, in London in 2012? And they might say, I remember they built this big stadium and they built this and they built that. And then you can say, well, what do they use them for now? And then that can link into getting some more ideas from them that helps them in the debate. Okay, anyway, so you've got that kind of quick warm up, and it's mostly focusing on key vocabulary that they'll need for today's class. We then move on to the debating skill. And the debating skill today is focusing on using conjunctions and conjunctive adverbs to make a counter argument. A load of fancy words, but these are basically words like although, actually, however, these kind of words. Students don't really need to know the technical grammar terms for these necessarily. They just need to know how to use them. So some quick information here about making counter arguments and how these words are used. Use this as an opportunity to see if your students already know the meaning of these words. Some, like however, they probably already know. Actually is probably a little bit more challenging. You might also want to show like how you can use some of these together. Like, although it can be argued this, actually I disagree because. Like, you can use these in different combinations as well. If you need some more information, in the top left corner in the teacher notes, it pops up with those teacher tips to help out if you need it. Yeah, and it's just saying here, it's like assist the student in making some simple counter arguments using these words as well. So some people say that the Olympics boost tourism, but actually, and then hand it over to your student to try and finish the sentence, see if they can think of a quick counter argument on the fly. It's true that the Olympics cost a lot of money. However, and then encourage your students to think about how does the Olympics earn money. They make money through tickets, like selling tickets to events. They make money through advertising, or when they put the Olympics on TV. They make money through tourism. Get them to think about some of those ideas. And then this then links into the next activity, which is a sort of gap fill using those words specifically. If the students need any extra help or to refer back to kind of the information that was on the previous slide, click on the info button and it just pops up with quick reminders of those 3 words and example sentences. There's also some more detail there. The students are really keen in learning the technical information. To be honest, at this level, the students might struggle to understand some of the grammatical concepts, like the way it's written out. But this is useful for you as a teacher to have a look at, just so you understand what the difference is between conjunctives, conjunctive adverbs, and how they're used in sentences, right? Like, why do we say some people say that, blah, 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 but actually, blah, blah, blah. But we don't say, however, actually. We would just say, however. The way in which we use the words might be a little bit different. So it's worth thinking about the parts of speech and showing them some example sentences to help. I'm rambling. The point being, hopefully they've picked it up, and then you're going to do this gap fill exercise. You can also use this just to point out where they go in the sentence. Like, although is used to introduce the initial argument, so it's the first part of the sentence, whereas however or actually are used to introduce the counter argument. So they have to go in the second half of the sentence. That's a nice, simple, easy way for students to see a difference between although versus however, for example. So here we've got something the Olympics are expensive. Well, this is introducing the main argument, the initial argument, sorry. So that must be although. It's true that the host country can earn a lot of money from tourism. Something is not enough to cover the cost. So this is introducing the counter argument, and it's the first word here. So when we go back to here, the difference between actually versus however. However is a conjunctive adverb, whereas actually is not a conjunctive, it's just the adverb. So we need a connecting word, a conjunctive. And so however is a connecting word, whereas here we need the but to be that connective. So if we look at this sentence here, there's no but, so we need however. So I'm trying to explain this relatively quickly because I know we're mostly teachers here. If you're not too confident with these, it is worth going and looking up some of the grammar beforehand to make sure you can explain it clearly to students. But the way I would explain it is like although has to introduce the initial argument, so it's at the beginning of the sentence. However is a connective, and it connects the initial idea to the counter argument, and actually introduces the counter argument, but we need a connective before it. That's why we've got but in this example here. Another thing that's interesting to note is actually is quite often used to introduce like data. So, although some people say this, actually that's not true because this data proves it's wrong. But again, that's probably a more advanced thing to talk about with students who've got a higher English level. Anyway, you then click check to check they got the answers correct. A little trophy reward pops up, nice little celebration. Great job. Let's move on. Okay, while we do that, I'm just going to quickly pop over to the chat because I realise I'm just talking to myself right now. Let's see what's going on in the chat here. Ivy's saying, I love the supporting material in debating classes to boost students' confidence prior to class and break the ice. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Yeah, if you look at the supporting materials, which are, let me show you, they're listed underneath the lesson here in the download section, the worksheet and the vocabulary list. The vocab list in particular send to students before the class so they can pre-learn the vocabulary and look up the translations in their language, look at the definitions, think about how the word is used in sentences. That's definitely worth doing before the class. I'll show you that in a bit more detail probably in a moment. But yeah, thank you, Ivy. I'm glad you found this helpful. Grant saying, Vietnam has never hosted or ever been to the Winter Olympics. Actually, that kind of makes sense. I feel like Vietnam probably doesn't get a lot of snow, so that makes sense. Maybe half a dozen attend the Olympics. Also, one student shared the Vietnamese athletes don't earn enough to make it worth it. That's interesting. That's another quite interesting debate topic, about, and you can link that in when your students maybe talk about this. You can say, why is it that only some countries host the Olympics? Is that fair? Is it fair that Vietnam has never had the opportunity to host the Olympics? Or maybe they've had the opportunity, but they've not really taken up on that, because countries have to apply to host the Olympics. Has Vietnam ever applied? That could be worth looking into. I feel like the one about the Winter Olympics is probably quite self-evident, to do with the lack of snow more than anything else. But some other countries do, compete at the Winter Olympics, even though they also don't have snow. So that could be something also worth talking about, and why there are different levels of support, perhaps in different countries, for elite sports. I think you said 3 million Vietnamese dong. That sounds like a lot of money. Cool. Yeah. Advanced students get to create a sentence with all the words. Fantastic. Yes, I love that as well. I see how many words, when we go back to the vocab list earlier, how many of those words they can combine together into one really big sentence, or one complete argument, perhaps. Good suggestion. I love it. I'd be saying, I love how supportive students are during the whole debate with the debating prompts. Yeah, that's something I find that, depending on the students, some students don't need that much support. In fact, occasionally with students, I'll just close the slides entirely, and we'll just have a bit more of a free-flowing debate, just with videos only, chatting to each other. But a lot of students, particularly when English is their second language, they do need a bit more scaffolding and support to give them, sentence structures, or useful words, or data to refer to, or just concepts and ideas they can draw upon. So yeah, I'm glad these sort of things have helped you in the slides to give your students that little bit of support to access debating. Heather's saying, I'm going to try it with a student who loves taekwondo. Hadn't thought of it before. Fantastic. I love that. I've never tried taekwondo, but it sounds cool. So great. And if you know your students have an interest in particular sports, definitely draw upon that in your sort of warm-up questions and in the examples and things you use throughout the class. What would you say is the best number of students for a group debate class? Personally, I quite like debates that are sort of 4 to 6 students. I think that's a nice number. I've done it in classroom. Like when I was teaching in Japan, I've run a few debates that were in a school classroom with 42 students. But with 42 kids, I broke them into smaller groups. And we didn't really have a big class debate in the same sense. We had a few big class activities where everyone shared ideas and things. But 42 kids was too many to have in one debate. So we broke them into smaller groups for that. But yeah, I would say in an online class, ideally, I would say a maximum of 6 students. You need at least 2, otherwise you haven't got any kind of opposing ideas to talk about. Although having said that, I have done one-on-one debating classes where I'm one side and the student is the other side of the argument, if that makes sense. You can do it that way. But for a nice group environment, I think 4 to 6 is a good number. If you have an odd number of students, just you yourself can stand in as like the extra person to make an even number if necessary. Can't say. The only part of Vietnam that gets snow is Northport, which I'm assuming is in the north. I can't think of the name of it, but it starts with an S. Sapa. I feel like that's in the mountainous region, right, in the north of Vietnam. Possibly. Cool. Can't say. $120. Oh, that's the number that sounded big earlier. 3 million Vietnamese dong, which was the prize for getting a medal if you're Vietnamese at the Olympics. Apparently it's $120. Ouch. I mean, that's something. You can't turn down free money, but there's a lot of work that goes into getting good scores, so like getting good results in the Olympics. So yeah, I can see why it's perhaps Vietnam doesn't have such a big turnout. But that's something to bring up with your students and talk about it. Do they think that the government should pay more for Olympic athletes? Should they put more money into the Olympics? Or do they think that money could be spent elsewhere? Like, what do they think the government's priorities could be? Can't say 4 to 6 students, 45 minutes or up to 8 if it's an hour. Yeah, that's great. And that's a good point. I would say these debating lessons are designed for 1 hour classes. You can do 45 minutes, particularly if it's a smaller group, but if you want everyone to engage well and talk a lot, you see I quite like chatting, as you can probably tell from today's ramble, then I would say an hour is a good length of time. My normal debating classes are 55 minutes is what I usually teach. If you've got a larger group, then yeah, an hour at least. You could even do a bit longer. It depends on the group size and how engaged they are, really. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Grant. Cool. Okay, let's pop back and have a look at the slides then. So far we have learnt some useful vocabulary, and we've learnt how to use these conjunctives and conjunctive adverbs to structure our counter arguments here. So although, however, and actually. This is probably around halfway through the debate class by now, I'd say, in terms of your timing and pacing. We're then going to move into the actual arguments, the points for and against. And to make it easier to understand the kind of concept of for versus against in a debate, I find it easiest to write out the debate motion in a sort of positive versus negative way. So we've got the Olympics are worth the cost versus the Olympics are a waste of money. These are the two points of view here. It's not really that official in terms of how we normally teach debating. Like really, when you teach debating, you just have the motion and you are either for or against. But I find particularly with ESL students, it helps to write out in a full sentence the actual point of view. And then all you need to do is, I would say, with your group of students, get them to take turns reading out each argument and then say they think it is for or like which side they think it goes. The host country can earn money from tourism. That's probably the Olympics are worth the cost, right? It costs more money to host the Olympics than earned in ticket sales and tourism. Well, that's saying it's a waste of money. They must build lots of expensive sports facilities. Well, that's expensive. That's a waste of money. But those sports facilities can be used in the future for other sports events. Well, then it's worth the cost. The Olympics inspire many children to do more sport. That's a positive thing, right? We're saying the Olympics are good. Or the host country could spend the money directly on children's sports clubs. This one, like students sometimes struggle to understand why this is against, but it's saying that it's the opposite of this one. So although the Olympics inspire many children to do more sport, actually, maybe it'd be more effective if the money was spent directly on children's sport, rather than it being a sort of nice, convenient side effect of the Olympics. So that's why it goes over here. So get your students to kind of try and sort them for and against. And at this point, if they've got the worksheet there, definitely try and get them to write down on the worksheet the arguments, because they're going to need that to refer back to that when it comes to the debate later on. I would also, at this point, use it as a way of refreshing their understanding of the although, however, actually, these words that we've learned already. So get them to take turns saying, like making a sentence using each pair. So these, you notice they automatically aligned in pairs because of the order they were in. So for example, the host money can earn lots of money from tourism. However, it costs more money to host the Olympics than earned in ticket sales. Although some people say that sports facilities could be used in the future for other sports events, actually, they must build lots and lots of expensive sports facilities and it's still not worth it. I feel like actually this might be better phrased the other way around now I say that. Although they must build lots of expensive sports facilities, actually they could still be used in the future, so it's worth it. So get them to try and make sort of counter arguments for each pair using those new words, those new expressions that we've learnt already. This could also be an opportunity if you want to jump across to like your whiteboard. So depending on your teaching platform, you might have a interactive whiteboard part as well. You might want to jump across to that and practice writing out those full sentences as the students are saying them, or get the students to write it out themselves using that actually, however, although these words. They've got that to refer to. Okay. And that then links very nicely into the next part, which is writing counter arguments. So again, it's basically what I was just saying on the previous slide. So rather than just saying it, you're now going to get them to write it down. So we've got our initial argument, the Olympics can earn lots of money from tourism. Well, our counter argument, although the Olympics can earn lots of money from tourism, can earn lots of money from tourism, actually. And if they're struggling to think of the counter argument, just go back to the previous page and remind them they can earn lots of money from tourism, but actually it was this argument. It costs more money to host than is earned. So then they can add that in to their argument here. Actually, it costs more money than is earned. Okay. They can also try and get them to phrase it in their own words and things as well. They don't have to say word by word the phrasing that was used in the previous slides, right? Try and get them to say it in their own words, and they might even have their own argument as well. They don't have to use the ones that have been presented so far. That's there as a support, but it's, there's no fixed answers really in debate. The great thing is about sharing your opinions and giving your own ideas. But yeah, it's getting them to write it down in this particular case. If they make some mistakes, work through and pick out, maybe they've said but actually, in which case, actually that just doesn't make sense. Maybe they said but however. Let's say they made this mistake here. Although the Olympics earn lots of money from tourism, but however, well, what's wrong with that? Well, these are both connectives. So what do we need to say? Well, we can just say the however is enough here. Or we could say but actually, or, So if they make a mistake, use this as an opportunity while you've got it written down here, sort of work on fine-tuning the grammar and the sentence structure and the word usage, or helping them give a more extended argument or something like that, depending a bit on the student's level and what they need to work on. Okay. There's actually another few that continue along the same idea. I'm not going to go through these because they're exactly the same concept. It's just a different argument, and now they've got to try and write the counter argument It's the same idea here. So they're going to write their own counter argument to these 3 different points. Okay. And then we always end the class with a more open-ended debate. And our learning objective is I can make arguments and counter arguments in a debate. And this is left kind of quite open for you to discuss with your students, because to be honest, at this point they should hopefully have written down some nice notes of arguments for and against. They've used and practiced using those sentence structures and those new words. So it's an opportunity for them to have a more open-ended discussion really around this. I would recommend, if you've got a larger group, you might want to break them off into breakout rooms to prepare their arguments, and like split it into 2 groups. So you've got the group that's arguing for and the group that's arguing against the motion. Put them into little breakout rooms, give them 3 minutes, 5 minutes. I keep the time short, give them a timer, and make sure they know what they're doing. And what they're going to do is they're going to prepare 3 points, either for or against the motion, and prepare a counter argument using actually, although, or however, for points they're anticipating the other, like the opponent, is going to make. So you can get them to go out into breakout rooms and do that. If you've got a smaller group, or maybe you're a bit pressed on time, you don't have to do it so formally. You can just have it as a more sort of informal discussion. It's nice having them in teams though, and try and assign them specifically for versus against. If you're using something like Zoom where you can rename the students' names, like put a note next to their name as to whether they are for or against, just to remind everyone what side of the argument they're meant to be arguing for. It's also a good practice, perhaps, if you can, and if you can remember what they said at the beginning of the lesson when they said if they thought the Olympics were good or bad for the host country. Try and assign them to the other side of the debate here, because that's going to force them to really think about different points of view, and get them to really consider. It's always good to challenge their perspectives, right? It also gives them a good point to start from in terms of thinking of counter arguments, because they themselves were originally coming from the opposite perspective. So it's good to get them thinking a little bit in different points of view. But yeah, and if you're short on time, you can sort of make this more of a discussion, and kind of go through things more quickly. If you've got plenty of time, then do the breakout rooms, do it as a proper formal debate, and really enjoy exploring that in detail. I also find it quite helpful. I talked already about switching across to having a whiteboard. I do find it quite helpful at this kind of point in the lesson to jump across to a whiteboard and just have like 2 columns, and you can write down the arguments the students are making for and against. And as you go through, perhaps work on helping them improve those arguments, adding more detail, correcting a few grammar mistakes here and there, or something like that, to help them make those arguments stronger, and show the links between the original argument versus the counter argument and so on. So it does help to jump across the whiteboard. Don't just rely 100% on the slides in these sections. So again, it depends on your students and what they're focusing on. Okay, so yeah, they kind of end in the debate. Now you might want to end here if you've got spare time. And there's also, there's not. Maybe it's the other one I'm thinking of. I put some extension questions. Oh, I didn't. I will have to add that. There's normally some extension questions that you can add on as extra debate topics if you've got extra time. But in this case, there isn't. Never mind. So we end with our feedback, and these are built into all of the Abridge Academy core curriculum lessons, and I'm gradually adding them to some of the other lessons and things as well. So on this feedback slide, you're going to give your students specific feedback on what they did well and how they can improve next time. And it's great to just, give a quick summary at the end of the lesson, really. So the new words, and you can just click here on the little medal thing to give them, did they get a bronze, a silver, or a gold for that particular skill. So the new words, if they were confident using those new words, let's give them a gold here. The grammar points, they did pretty well at that, but maybe they struggled a little bit in using it correctly later on on the more open-ended debate. They were a little bit iffy here and there. So let's call it silver. Debating skills, preparing strong counter arguments. Maybe they had some really great original ideas and we're very impressed with that. So let's give them a gold. And then you can just add a little comment here like, great job, blah, blah, blah. Write more detail than that. Tell them what they did really well, what you were particularly impressed with. What was a particular argument that stood out for you that they made? Did they do really well at challenging their own perspectives and, change their point of view to give a different argument at the end? Anything like that. And then you can just take a screenshot of this and send it through to the parents after the class, to celebrate what their student has achieved. Okay. So yeah, that is a quick run through, or actually quite a long run through, thank you for listening, to the first debating lesson, which is aimed at intermediate level students and is, focusing there on formulating simple counter arguments using although, however, and actually. So hopefully you found that interesting. And if you've used this with your students, please do let me know in the chat. I would love to hear how your classes have gone, or if you're excited to use them, or any ideas and things you've got. We also have some time, so I'm going to jump across and show you the advanced slides in a moment, which focuses more on using data, which is going to be really great for students preparing for specific exams and things like that. I can talk a bit more about that in a moment. But before we jump across to the advanced slides, let's just have a look at the chat and see if there's anything interesting going on here. Grant saying my group class is on a budget. Yep, fair enough. They can't afford an hour, so I had to condense it to 45 minutes. Ooh, that's challenging sometimes with groups. I know some of my groups get very chatty, and we overrun quite a lot on my hour-long classes, so I'm terrible at time management sometimes. But yeah, you can condense these. As you can see today, I know I was just sort of rushing through it and talking about things, but today we went through the slides. It was only about half an hour or so of presenting. Obviously, there'd be more discussion around that, but there'd also be less of me calling up questions in the chat. So you can do a 45-minute class, particularly if it's a smaller group. Or you can also skip some sections. So for example, maybe you feel like they already know the new words. There's no need to spend ages practicing making sentences using the new words. You can just skip ahead past that section and straight on to the debating skill. Or perhaps it's the other way around. We need to really focus on those key words, and you know they're going to struggle with coming up with their own arguments for and against, so you're just going to stick with the ones that are given on the slides and then jump straight to the final debate. You know, you can adapt to which bits to focus on if you've got to cut out some sections of the lesson to keep your class down to a more manageable time, while still making sure they're actually, focusing on the key learning objectives. So it might be you cut out a section and then you're going to focus on the other learning objectives to make sure they've really mastered those instead. Question here, what is the price range per student that seem willing to pay? I'm not sure if that's aimed at Grant or at me. I can say from my own experiences with debating, I mean, it depends on where your students are based and what their goals are, their kind of education background, their family situation. There's a whole bunch of different factors that affect how much students are willing to pay. In my own experience with debating classes, which I've taught mostly students in China, but I've also taught some students across other countries as well. And I've also taught on some platforms like OutSchool, for example, where you can sort of list up a class for students all around the world to come and join in. I would say that debating classes in a group, you might want to charge, say, $20 or so per hour is what I've kind of been charging with those groups. With 4 to 6 students, that can add up to quite a decent earning for you as a teacher. And if you're going to do it as a one-on-one class or like a small group where you're paying a fixed price for the whole class, then for my debating, I would say I've charged around sort of $50 to $60 per hour for a smaller group class or a one-on-one class with debating. But it very much depends on, so I don't want to give too much like this is the price you have to charge, because it's totally up to you and your own teaching background and your target audience, your target students. I would say if you're focusing on students who've got plans to go study abroad in the near future, for example, and quite a lot of mine kind of fit into that category, they often do have a higher disposable income because they're looking at moving abroad, and which is why they really want the debating classes, because that really helps with developing the skills they need to study in an English medium school and to be able to communicate their ideas effectively in class. And also because they've got the money to study abroad, they've generally got the sort of the ability to purchase higher price classes if necessary. So they're willing to pay a high price if the classes are going to help them achieve what they're looking for. When we move on to look at the advanced slides, I can talk a bit more about how that links into certain exams and things too. Because if you've got students preparing, for example, for like the IELTS exam, maybe they're sort of older teenagers and they are like literally in the process of applying to study abroad, right? For like the IELTS exam, I think it's the same as some other English exams as well. They often are given data they have to analyze and formulate text, write text, and or respond to, basically using exactly the skills they learn in the more advanced debating class I'll show you in a moment. So if you can link things into key skills they need to achieve a really specific important goal for them, like passing the IELTS exam, which is an absolute essential they need to achieve their dream of studying abroad, which is going to have a huge impact on their future career and their future study plans, that's where you're able to charge a high rate for your classes, because you're helping your students achieve something that's super, super important. So obviously it does depend a bit on your students, a lot on your students really. Sorry, I'm rambling a lot there, but your pricing's up to you and up to you to negotiate with students to see what they're willing to pay. But do keep in mind like the value you add and how much these classes can help them. I'd be saying, would you recommend making competitive among students with a reward system they're split into 2 groups? Yeah, I love that. And in fact, if you look at like competitive debate formats, which is in the Abridge Academy debate curriculum, we've got over 30 lessons, which are teaching all the kind of debating skills that students need. And there's also some kind of introductory level training on certain competitive debating formats. In some of those, though, in a competitive debate, there is a rating system and a way in which that people making arguments are assessed, right? And you might even, if your students are preparing for that kind of a debate, want to assign one student to be the role of the person assessing the arguments. So particularly if you've got like an odd number of students, you can give one student to be the judge, and they are going to, note down the key points that the other groups are making and rate them according to the rubric that the debate that they're preparing for uses, to kind of give suggestions. So you can get students themselves to put together that reward system or that assessment system perhaps as well. that's perhaps looking at more advanced students. I think if you're using this as a more fun first sort of debating class with students for them to just check out the idea of debating, then maybe don't do it too competitively. But yeah, if you've got students who are preparing for competitive debate, then it's worthwhile using this in a particular debate format that they're going to be using in their debate, and using the assessment kind of rubric that's used in the debate, and get a student to look at that and analyze that and assess each other, practice doing that as well. But yeah. As a teacher, if you're just doing it more informally, you can just give stars and trophies and things like that whenever students make great points. Like, go for it that way, I would say. Keep it a little bit more fun. Okay. Well, I hope you found this interesting. I'm going to jump across and have a look at the more advanced slides now. But do let me know in the chat if you're kind of excited about teaching these slides. If you've got any questions at all, of course, you're always welcome to ask those. And if you've used them yourself, I know Grant's already mentioned that he was using them. I think last week, Grant was messaging me about this as well. Let me know if you've been using them yourself with your students, or you've done something similar, and love to hear your insights as well. Okay, so yeah, that was the intermediate level one, which was focusing on formulating counter arguments. The advanced debate on the Olympics here is on exactly the same topic, but instead of just focusing on counter arguments, they're going to be focusing on using data and a simple structure to strengthen their argument. So it's basically how to use evidence and data to back up what you're saying. You can't just say the Olympics earn loads of money. Right? You'll say, how much money did they earn? Like, what's the actual number? What's the return on investment? Like, that kind of data really makes your argument stronger. And that's what they're going to focus on in these more advanced lessons here. I'm going to skip through it a little bit more quickly because the first section is very similar. So I'm not going to spend hours and hours going through stuff we already know. But yeah, if I just zoom in a bit as well, let this fit better on the screen. And my face is too big. We'll get there. Here we go. Okay, so here the debate emotion is exactly the same. This house believes the Olympics is a waste of money. And again, we can put in our student name and our teacher name. Who wants to be the student this time? Who's been messaging most recently? Ivy. Ivy's been messaging. Great. Ivy, you can be our student. And I'll put in my name as a teacher name, and then we'll start. So we've got a similar kind of warm-up questions. So we're going to skip through that. Same idea, just get them to warm up and share their initial thoughts. We've got similar kind of concepts again with learning new words, and again they're basically the same words. I seem to remember they're the same words that they're going to be learning, but we're going to be using them in a different context. So again, you're just practicing, get to make sentences, get to explain a definition. Maybe you give a definition, let them say which word they think meets that definition, and so on. Just practicing those new words. Same sort of gap fill type activity, same as before. And then we move on to the arguments, and again, similar concept to what we saw previously. They're just going to sort the arguments into, is it worth the cost, or is it a waste of money? Same as before. So you see the first part of the lesson is kind of the same. So we're looking at basic vocabulary and some key arguments for and against, which is just forming the foundations for the lesson. The debating skill that they're going to focus on here is going to be different. So debating skill now is looking at using evidence to support a point in a debate. So I know this slide is a bit overwhelming. I probably should have simplified it a bit. But so here we're going to look at, where's my face going to go? Over here. We've got this idea using evidence in a debate, and we've got some questions that you can use, just to kind of get students to think about what this data means. And the data here is real data looking at the Olympics from, what's that, 50-year period? 1964 to 2018. And it's just telling you, like, basically how much money did the Olympics cost and how much did it earn. And interestingly, the key number at the bottom here, ROI, so the return on investment, minus 43%, which is quite an interesting one to point out here, because just looking at that, you can see that the Olympics make a loss on average. They make quite a big loss, in fact. But we can talk a bit more about what that data actually means, and is there enough data there to really say it's making a loss? Can you really measure all of this? Great things to talk about with the students. But yeah, I would start by just pulling up the data and get them to think about, what does this mean? Make sure they understand the word. Like, revenue means money that you've made. Okay? Broadcast revenue specifically, like from the TV. Sponsorship revenue comes from companies, because they might not know the word sponsorship, but they probably know the word company or business, right? Or advertisement, sorry, if you're American. And ticketing revenue is from the tickets. So you can make sure they understand what these key words mean, and you might want to annotate it with some notes if they're struggling to understand some of the concepts. And of course, we've got the cost here, like organizing it, and the venue, like building the new facilities, that kind of thing. So yeah, so you just get to think, what do the keywords mean? Then ask them, what's the table about? It's about the cost and the earnings of the Olympics. Overall, do countries lose or gain money? Well, it says quite clearly here, profit versus loss, where it's a minus sign here, return on investment minus 43%. It's a big loss, right? So they're making a loss. So is it for or against the motion the Olympics are a waste of money? Well, it's saying, yeah, it's kind of for that motion. The Olympics are a waste of money because they're losing money, okay? But then that could lead into the argument, well, is the Olympics all about money anyway? Like, what are the other benefits of the Olympics? Get them to think a bit more critically about this, rather than just looking at the numbers at face value. Okay, the Olympics make a loss on paper, but we've got a question here, what additional information would you like to have? Well, these aren't all of the numbers about the Olympics. What's missing here? Well, think about our key words. We learned the word tourism. Is tourism here on the list of revenue? Well, no, it hasn't listed how much money that they made from tourism in terms of the tax revenue the government's made from like all of the hotels and stuff, the businesses that have benefited from the Olympics. Is that easy to measure? Well, perhaps not. Talk to the students a bit about how they could collect that kind of data. Why is that data not easily available? How reliable is the data? That's an opportunity for them to really sort of develop more critical thinking skills and actually think about how you can use data. And, you know, I sound a bit cynical here, but we do handpick data, right? We pick the data that supports our argument. So this data is being picked because it supports the argument that the Olympics are a waste of money. But you could collect different data that could show a very different point of view. So use this as an opportunity to draw on different perspectives and get students to criticize and analyze things a bit more. And it says, like, what useful fact could you use to make a point? So if you're going to give them this data, what point would they make and what key number would they pick out? And I would probably highlight the bottom one here, the return on investment, as being a really nice, easy to understand percentage. But, you know, they could pick out different numbers depending on what they want to emphasize. If you're struggling to understand some of this, what I've been talking about, do have a look at the teacher tips. Oh, I didn't put many tips here, sorry. Use the questions, discuss the data. But yeah, it's supposed to get your students to think a bit. That is the goal here when we talk about using evidence. So you've had a good discussion, hopefully, around this. And that's going to lead into this section here, what we call the PEE structure. Now, I know someone's going to comment saying, isn't it PEAL or P with an A in the middle, or all these different names for it? Depending on what country you're from and who your teacher was, so you hear very different variations on what the words are. But the basic concept is you make a point, you add some evidence, and you explain the evidence, or you analyze the evidence, or there's various words that are used, but some kind of detail, you talk about the evidence a bit. And then sometimes L gets added on the end for link, like linking into the next bit or something like that. There's various different ways, but a nice basic structure that students can kind of easily understand is this one: point, evidence, explanation. The point, the Olympics cost more money than they earn. The evidence, relate this back to the previous slide, on average, the Summer Olympics make a loss of 43%. Explanation, therefore, the Olympics are a waste of money, right? They cost more than they earn. So that's a really simple way of structuring a basic argument. And it's using evidence to back up a point. You get your students to think a bit more about this. You know, what else could they make? What other points could they draw upon? What other data could they use to make a different point? Get them to talk a bit more about it. Ask comprehension questions too, just to check they've understood the information on the page here. Again, depends a bit on the level of your students as to how much detail you want to go into on all of this. I already got this filled out because I did this already earlier on. But we've got then this, our claim, the Olympics can earn more money from tourism. And just like in the previous lesson, the kind of intermediate level lesson where they had to write their counter arguments, here, I'm going to delete that because we're not doing that this time. This time we're going to be using the PEE structure to improve this argument by adding evidence. So the Olympics can earn lots of money from tourism. That's our main point. Let's add some evidence. We've got the point already. We don't need to write it again. The evidence is going to be, let's go back to that data. Where's it gone? The revenue, 30,000-ish million. These were in millions of US dollars. Actually, this is tourism specifically. We don't have that data. Students can go away and look up some data. And let's say, actually, there's a link. I knew I had points here. Click here for useful data, it says. So let's click on this link and see what information we can find to help us with this argument. Oh, stop sharing. Share the screen. It's still working. Share screen. What's going on here? Hang on, just a moment. Let me fix the screen sharing. So the link just goes to an article with some data that they can use to support their arguments. Remembering our point being that the Olympics earn money from tourism. That's the data we're going to look for here. Make sure you preview this yourself before you teach the class so you know what to kind of highlight here. So if you scroll down, here we go. This section here, are the Olympics Games an overall benefit the host country and cities? And we've got arguments for and against. And we look specifically at where it mentions tourism. So increase valuable tourism. Here we go. Brazil set tourism records with 6.6 million foreign tourists and $6.2 billion US. There we go. And just for today, I'm going to copy and paste that across because we haven't got all day to do this. So let's put that data here. Obviously, if you're doing this in the class with your students, why is it not showing? What is with my screen sharing today? We'll get there. Share screen. Every time I switch to the other tab, it stopped the sharing for some reason. Here we go. And then put the share up on the screen. Okay, we got there. Right, so I've just copy and pasted that data across from the link. Obviously, if you're doing this with a real class with students, you probably want them to get them to say it in their own words or pick out. There's lots of different bits of data on that page, by the way. There's loads of data about tourism revenue from different countries and different years of the Olympics. But I've just picked out this one as a quick example. So we've got here, Brazil set tourism records with 6.6 million foreign tourists and $6.2 billion. So that's our evidence. Now we need our explanation. So don't forget the explanation. Therefore, the Olympics can be a huge boost to local businesses and increase tax revenue. Whatever. Get them to talk a bit more about, what this money is being used for. How is that helping the country? How is that helping individual people? Get them to explain a bit more about this data, that kind of thing. So they're going to improve this particular point. And then basically the same kind of thing comes up with some new slides here. So the next one, we're looking at money is not the only important thing. Like we talked before about that data. Are the Olympics just about making money? No, there's a huge amount of other things they have to think about. The Olympics also inspire many children to do more sport. And we've got a link here. Is this link actually showing? Work this time, right? This link is the data from the UK government based on the London 2012 Olympics. It was hard to find more relevant recent data because it takes some years for them to collect this data longer term, unfortunately. But yeah, we looked here at some of the data about percentage of students doing sport, and it said here that the percentage of students participating in sport increased from 86.6% to 94.4%. So we've got some data here that could help. Depending on the time you've got in your class, you can get your students to read more detail about this. Get them to read out the whole section here and then pick out some useful facts, do some reading comprehension practice, that kind of thing. But I personally would just highlight this key bit, get them to pick out the data, get them ideally to say it in their own words, and then we're going to jump across to our slides and put that data in. And I've just copy pasted because I'm lazy. I'm just going to edit it a little bit shorter, increase from 86.2% to 94% following the 2012 Olympics. Right. So we've got some data, and then you're going to get them to explain. Therefore, the Olympics were had a huge impact on children doing sports, which would improve. Like, why is this important? Well, it's going to improve health and fitness in the future. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more around that point. If you talk more, this just expands. You can like put more detail here, and you can scroll up and down. Sorry, it's because I've zoomed in weirdly. It's scrolling funny, but you can write more, and you can just use the scroll bar to make the text longer if you need to. So in this way, you've got them to start with a point, find some data to support that point, and then sort of explain it in a bit more detail as to how that data is supporting the point and what the overall benefits are of that. Okay. I'm not going to do the next thing in more detail. Oh, we've got here reading part. I am going to look at this. Okay. Before we move on to the next part, there's actually some reading here which is talking a bit more detail about that point. So interestingly, the data in the 2012 London Olympics showed that basically in the short term after the Olympics, students' sport participation increased. But within 3 years, it dropped back down to normal levels again. So basically, it didn't have any longer term impact on children's sport participation. It did in the short term, but not longer term. And if you think about the huge cost of the Olympics, is the short term impact enough? Right, that's an interesting debate and discussion to have. So there's a little reading comprehension exercise here. I couldn't find an easy article on it, so rather than linking to an external article, I've just written a short section instead. And we've got here some data. And in particular, it says here by 2017 though, so only a few years later, the number of children at the same age doing sport had decreased to 87%, almost the same as before the Olympics. So that kind of implies that the Olympics didn't have a huge impact. You can talk a bit more about that though, because what other factors could have affected it? Right? It's not just the Olympics. What else was going on at the same time? If you look at stuff more recently, something like COVID would have had a huge impact, right, on children's sports participation. If you look at more recent data, you also have to think about what other societal changes are going on in the world. During that time, there's probably been quite a big increase in children using social media, children playing video games, children having access to phones and things like that. You know, society was going through a lot of other changes too that also would have affected sports participation, because if children have got phones and social media to entertain themselves, they're less interested in going to sports clubs. So the fact that the level of participation, a few years after the Olympics was the same, that could still have been a positive impact of the Olympics, but affected by negative other impact, if that makes sense. So get your students to think a bit more widely around it if they can. Again, depends on the level of your students and the amount of depth you want to go into on that. But it can be a really great discussion point too. Okay, so yeah, little reading comprehension bit to pick out some data. And then that links into a final similar exercise to the previous ones, getting to write a counter argument using this structure. So we're now couching our original argument that the Olympics inspire many children to do sport. However, data shows that actually blah, blah, blah. And then you can use that data from the previous page to form the counter argument using that PEE structure to assist. Just like I said previously with these previous sections, do use this as an opportunity to get your students to sort of write out their arguments, check their sort of grammar, check the way that they're phrasing things, check that they're following that structure properly, get them to try and extend their arguments a bit more, get them to think about different points of view, kind of work on improving and developing the sentences that they're using, depending again on your students' level and what they're focusing on. Very adaptable around them. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, right. And then just like with the previous slides, we end with a more open-ended debate. On this motion, the Olympics are a waste of money. And this time, they're going to be pairing 3 points for or against the motion, and then they're going to particularly focus on using evidence and the PEE structure to back up their points. With this one, if you've got quite a decent sized group, you're going to split into breakout rooms and that kind of thing, you might want to give them a little bit more time and send them to actually go away and find data themselves. So obviously you can send them the links to the articles that we refer to throughout the slides, but you might also want to just get them to go research the different Olympic Games. Like maybe they are from a country that hosted the Olympics before, get them to go research the data for their own Olympics. Depending on the time you've got available, but it can be a great way to get them kind of linking into their own interests and their own experiences as well. Okay, and yeah, and then we end with our little congratulations. So well done. I know I use Ivy's name here as our example. So congratulations, Ivy. Well done for your great work today. And again, we're going to rate your students on the levels here, how they did in each section. Maybe she did really well at all of this. Great job. Gold medals all round. And then you can add more detail in the comment section here. Take a screenshot and then send through to parents after the class. Okay, so yes, so I know I went through kind of quickly through that last one because I didn't really jump across the questions that much, just because I wanted to show you some of the key ideas and give you some top tips and suggestions on how you can teach this with different students. I really enjoy teaching debating because it's getting students to really analyse and think critically about things, get them to develop those advanced speaking skills, get them to share their opinions, share their own perspectives, discuss different ideas, challenge their own opinions and perspectives, work together as a team, develop research skills, so many things they learn through debating. So I think it can be a lot of fun. These debating, like Olympic themed lessons, as I said, you can get them for free. I'm going to pull up the link again just because little promo. You can get them for free. The link is in the description under the video for these lesson slides that you can use for talking about the Olympics. Abridge Academy also has a huge debating curriculum that you can use for a wide range of other debate topics too. So do check that out. If your students enjoy this class, use it as a little trial to start with. Use this Olympic themes one, do a group class with your students as a sort of celebratory event around the Olympics, do a free open class perhaps, or just use it with your existing students in their standard lessons. Get an idea as to whether they enjoy this. But if it's something you think your students would be interested in learning more about, then do check out the Abridge Academy debating lessons, which have got 30 more lessons, kind of structured in a similar way, with lots of great discussion and debate and analysing different perspectives and developing a whole range of different debating skills. I'm just going to pop across to the chat. If you've got any questions at all, do pop them in the chat and I'll try and answer those and discuss a bit more of this before we wrap things up. Ivy saying, would you recommend making, oh, we did that already, hang on. One underneath that I wanted to call up. Ivy said, a good idea having one of them be the judge. I was worried about them liking them less after my final sentence. Yeah, I feel like sometimes I'm that kind of sneaky teacher. Rather than giving bad feedback to someone, I'll put it on someone else to deal with that. Give the students the job. And it's actually really good for their own kind of skill development. Give them the job of assessing each other. I've done this particularly when I've had really big groups. Like when I was teaching in the school in Japan, I would, and like maybe students were doing a presentation activity, like there's a group project that was being presented and the rest of the class was just sitting and watching. Rather than getting them to passively sit and watch, give them little handouts where they're going to not mark as such, not too formal, but give feedback on the group that's presenting. So give them a little handout on what maybe 3 key things that you're looking for in a great presentation, and then you get them to kind of score their classmates. And you can use that same concept, with like debating, for example. Get one classmate to be the judge, or get a few to be the judge, depending on your group size. And there are lots of resources out there in terms of sort of assessment worksheets or like assessments rubric and stuff you can use. Adapt it and make sure it's sort of ESL friendly and appropriate to the levels of your students, and use the specific skills you're focusing on. Like here, we're specifically looking at data and evidence. That'd be something you'd want to include on that rubric that you'd give the student in this specific class. But yeah, no, it's a great way to get students engaged in different ways. I also added, I love linking the lesson to actual articles and data. Yeah, I think it's really great. It's good to have stuff that's been written specifically for ESL students every now and then, but I think it is also important, particularly when we look at like intermediate to advanced students, get them to use more authentic materials, because it's giving them exposure to real English. And of course, there'll be things they don't understand in those texts, particularly like some of those were like government data, like articles. There's going to be some challenging words, there are going to be concepts maybe they don't understand, but it's about getting them to sort of learn the ability to skim read and pick out some key facts, to kind of infer meaning from the context, and pick out the information they need, even though they don't 100% understand everything else. So it develops a whole range of others of reading skills and things as well. So yeah, I always love drawing upon actual article and data because it makes it a little bit more real and more authentic. I was asking, how do you use your words? I can't speak. I've been talking too much. How do you usually handle correcting students during the lesson and debate itself? Do you note their main mistakes or struggles or give feedback at the end? It depends a bit here for me on the group size and also how active the debate is going. So if the students are really engaged and really kind of getting involved in it, I don't want to kind of interrupt that too much by jumping in like, oh, you made a grammar mistake, because that's kind of annoying and affects the flow. In which case I'll be noting down things on the screen. So I'll get it to, depending on your teaching platform, it might have a way of like creating a transcript of what the students are saying, in which case you can just copy paste that, pop it on the screen, and then later on have a little feedback session where you refer back to the things that the student said and say, look, you said this sentence here, but actually we don't quite use it in that context, or that word usage was a bit strange, or you could have improved your argument doing this. So you can just take notes during the debate bit itself and then have a little dedicated time to give feedback on some of the key sections. Even better, talking about getting your students to do feedback. Even better, hand it over to them and say, look, I've taken these 3 quotes from your debate you just had. And in the debate, I noticed there were a few mistakes in these 3 quotes. So I picked those out here. What do you think the mistakes are? And get them to analyze the text themselves. And they'll say, oh, I used however to introduce the original argument, not the counter argument. We don't say, however, some people say that the Olympics are great for sport, but but actually many children don't continue doing sport longer term. You say actually, not however, right? Going back to that was the previous lessons that we talked about, forming counter arguments. So you can get them to like pick out a few where they've made some mistakes that link into what you've been learning about in the class, or things you definitely feel they need to work on. Maximum 3, I would say. It depends on the time. You don't want to spend hours and hours doing this. Pick out a few key ones, particularly if it's a common mistake they're making multiple times. Put the example up on the board, like on the whiteboard bit, like close the slides, go to your whiteboard, put that example up there, and then get the students themselves to analyze those quotes and highlight where they think the mistake is or how they could improve it. Or maybe you thought it was a good example, but they could add more detail and put it up there saying, well, what extra detail could you add? Or what data could you use? Well, where could you find better data to support this? And get them to go think about it in more depth. So yeah, that's what I would recommend doing in the actual debate. Other parts, like in the bit of the lesson, let me just go back. The bit of the lesson where they're writing out the arguments themselves. This part here, where you get them to actually write it out, this is a good opportunity to kind of do that analysis as they're doing it, because you're writing it down, or you're getting the students to write it. Ideally, you want the students to be typing, not just you. That's an opportunity, to do that correction and stuff as a group while you're actually looking at it. That's what these parts are really working on. But when it comes to the open-ended debates, I would be more flexible when you give the feedback. Maybe wait till the end, or a convenient section where you can pick out some of those quotes and analyze it and discuss it as a group. Okay, Tati's saying you're awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I hope you found this interesting and hopefully you got you a bit excited about teaching some of these debate themed lessons. And yeah, give you some ideas of what you could do with these lessons with your own students. So thank you for tuning in. Ivy's also saying thank you. Thank you, Ivy. Awesome walkthrough and insights, Katie. This was an amazing webinar. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I was actually messaging with Ivy earlier, and she kind of encouraged me to do this. So thank you, Ivy, for suggesting it. And I hope this has been helpful for everyone. I'm going to wrap things up here because we've gone over an hour already. And this is meant to be a quick thing. But yeah, I do really appreciate everyone who's tuned in. I hope you found this helpful. Do let me know quickly in the chat if you're excited to teach some of these debating theme lessons with your students. If you've got lower level students, by the way, the link below takes you to the Olympic themed ESL classes from Abridge Academy. They're free. There's also stuff for beginners, focusing just on like sports vocabulary and stuff as well. You don't have to do debating if you don't want to. There's stuff at all levels. But I hope you found this helpful and it's inspired you a little bit. Just let me know in the chat what you're planning to do next with these ideas. Matthew's saying, thank you, Katie. During the tutorial, I went ahead and set up a free debate trial and one of the students I invited already confirmed. Awesome. That's fantastic. Look at that. Results already within a 1 hour session. That's great. Really great to hear. And I'm glad this has inspired you. And I hope that debate trial class goes well because, yeah, hopefully they have a lot of fun and you have a lot of fun and they learn some great skills. And yeah, wishing you all the success with that. So thank you for sharing. Really appreciate it. Awesome. But yeah, just a reminder, link is in the description below or above. I think if you're watching on Facebook, it's above the video. If you're watching on YouTube, it's below the video. Link is there in the description for you to get these lesson slides for free. Let me know what you think about them. If you want more lessons like this, there's a whole debating curriculum of 30 more lessons, all kind of along similar lines, developing different debate skills on a whole range of different topics. So do check that out as well. Okay, I'm going to wrap things up because I'm rambling. Thank you so much, and I will see you again next time. Also, don't forget, like, subscribe, all those wonderful things, because that always helps these videos as well. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your evening. Here in the UK, it's the evening, so have a great evening, or if you're in America, rest of your day. And if you've tuned in from like Asia, thank you for waking up in the middle of the night. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you